Today, we're going to go over the learnings from looking at dozens of expertise Scipio battle reports, using him as the primary and the secondary, and in all kinds of crazy combos that the live stream chat was requesting that we test. And there were several really important insights that I learned after all that testing, looking into these battle reports and digging into the details. So stick around in this video for some really important misconceptions about the strength of the CJ and Scipio pairing, how shields with Alexander the Great and Scipio work, and just in general, which combos are really strong and which ones kind of fell down and were not as good as expected. Now, before I begin, I want to tell you about a game I've been playing a ton, and they are sponsoring this video, and that is War and Order. I have been playing War and Order sort of obsessively for the last month, and the more I play, the more I enjoy it. This is a war game where you are building up your city and preparing a whole bunch of things that you collect over time, including your artifacts, which give a bunch of stats, and also your equipment, which gives a bunch of stats, and more, including, yes, even a beast. I've just evolved my Phoenix to the next level. Let's freaking go. And I am still really enjoying this game. Now, we created a community in War and Order that you can join. So if you'd like to check out War and Order, the link will be in the description, and you can become a member of the Smash Squad, where we have multiple alliances in Realm 1492. The link will be in the description, where you can download the game, and all the information you need will be there. And if you start playing before the 1st of May, enter code Chisgule for some free stuff in-game. Let's freaking go. So thank you again to War and Order for sponsoring this video, and I hope you will join me in the Smash Squad. Use the link down below to download, and let's get started. I'm going to start this video with a sort of nerdy, mathy stuff, and I'll give you very simple conclusions so it's easy to understand up front. But if you want to jump to any part of the video, use the timestamps in the description to get to exactly what you want to see. First thing I want to talk about is shielding and the overlap of shields with Scipio and Alexander the Great. Both of them have shields, by the way. Scipio has a triggered shield that affects himself and 2 other targets. It is triggered based off of Scipio taking skill damage, and Alexander the Great, he does shields based off of his active skills. And what I found when I used these two together, remember, this is a pairing I wanted to use on my main account, is that there were some times where I would trigger the shield from Scipio and use the shield from Alexander the Great, but shields don't stack. Only the stronger shield prevails. Even though it's an active skill and a passive skill, it doesn't matter. That's just not how shielding works in this game. So the problem is that you lose the Scipio shield entirely on the Scipio Alex March, because instead it did the stronger Alexander the Great active skill shield. So what does this mean? Well, I'll show you the test results with Scipio and Alexander the Great. It's still a fine combo, but you do lose a little bit of the value of some of that shielding if you put them together. So if you could split them up without breaking, having really strong combos, then I think that is a good choice. The other thing that we learned is really unusual about triggered skill damage reduction. Now, this is important if you're using Scipio. You want to understand this. This skill, the same one we were just talking about, has a triggered skill damage reduction. When you take skill damage, there is a chance you will reduce that skill damage. Well, it turns out that one of the most, I think, anticipated and hyped combos for Scipio is Scipio with CJ. And CJ happens to have skill damage reduction as well that is triggered. There is a chance, 40% chance to have incoming skill damage reduced by 50%. This is a big deal. But by looking into the battle reports, I learned something very important about the way that these skill damage reduction abilities actually stack on these unusual, this is kind of unusual, these abilities that do one instance of skill damage taken reduction. So I'm going to talk about this, but first I'll give you the summary. And for those of you that don't want to see the math, you can just skip ahead to the battle reports. But the TLDR is that if you have other ways to split these commanders, you should do it, because you will get more total mitigation by having them not together. This is really important to understand, and I will show you the math now. This is a very important turn that we're looking at because both the Scipio damage reduction and the CJ damage reduction, when I had them paired together, it triggered on the same turn. So we're looking up here, Gilgamesh cast Roar of the Lion, and Scipio primary, CJ secondary, loses 1,718 units. Now, there's something very important you will notice right away, which is that, remember, CJ does a 50% reduction if it happens to trigger for that skill damage. But what happened over here? 1,719 units lost. So it did a 50% reduction. But what's important is it's a 50% reduction of the final number that was already reduced by Scipio, right over here, by 30%. Let me just give you some really basic math so it's very easy to understand. If you were to take 1,000 skill damage, because Scipio, I think, is the primary, his mitigation happens first, but it doesn't exactly matter the order, but we'll do it in the same order as the battle log to make this easier. So Scipio would do his 30% reduction. So you would go from 1,000 damage taken to 700 damage taken. You're reducing by 30%. Then CJ, if you're lucky, does his 50% reduction. So you take the 700, you cut that sucker in half, and that's a 350 final damage taken number. And it's also an additional 350 of damage reduction. In other words, the CJ skill reduced the damage you take by 350. Now, you may be thinking, wait a minute. Scipio is reducing by 30%, and I reduced the damage taken by 300, but CJ is reducing the damage by 50%, and it only reduced it by 350. What's happening there? That is because it's multiplicative. But if you were to put these onto two different commanders, and you assume that I'm just going to take lots of area of effect damage, it's all going to happen at about the same time, now the math gets really interesting. Because if you split them up, you would have one march taking 1,000 damage factor, and Scipio is in that march. It would reduce that by 30%, so you drop it down to 700 taken. Then on the other march, CJ is there, and CJ reduces the skill damage of 1,000 by 50%. That's 500. So you get more total mitigation by splitting Scipio and CJ because of that interaction and the multiplicative nature of this particular effect, which is reducing one instance of skill damage by a certain amount. Because if it overlaps, you're losing out on value. Will it overlap all the time? No, and you probably could do some quick math to see how often will you win the dice roll of the two reductions happening at the same time. But it's the sort of thing where, like, you know, if you try to find incremental edge in all these different places, like with the Alex shields and also with skill damage taken reduction, all of these little things in many places throughout your optimizations start to add up, which is why I plan to use on my restart project, Guan and Scipio, because obviously I still think that's the best pairing. And then also I plan to use Alex and CJ together, splitting up that instant proc mitigation and splitting up the shields. Seems like a good idea. So hopefully that didn't bore you to death, or you use the timestamps to navigate to this portion of the video where I can show you some really cool stuff. This is a Guan Scipio against a Guan Herald. Very favorable trade for the Guan and Scipio. This is expertise commanders. There's no equipment on. Everybody should not have a city theme running. And also they should have a 5% defense token running. Now, I want to call out that in this round of testing, we weren't doing like scientific research, right? Where it's like 20 tests of the same pairing over and over to see how it works. This is just, I think, broad testing. I don't know, kitchen sink testing. You throw the kitchen sink at it. You just try a lot of things and see what sticks and what really stands out as a top performer. That's what we're trying to do here, okay? Here is a Scipio and Alexander the Great combo against Guan Yu and Alex, and it won by a lot. I think the extent to which you win or lose can vary tremendously based on the luck of an Alexander the Great or Scipio proc, because, you know, Scipio also has instant proc damage, obviously. It's so insane. But this is very luck-based, which side will do well. In this next report, this is a Scipio and CJ against a Guan and Scipio. I lost. I mean, there's a lot of randomness involved here, but I think that Guan and Scipio is my favorite pair. And by the way, if you were making one open field pair right now and you were investing sculptures, I think the single best march you can make is Guan Scipio for pure open field. Why is that? You have an AoE silence, you have an AoE health reduction, you have AoE shielding, you have instant proc damage, you have a ton of march speed. Bro, I mean, come on. It's so strong. Here is a Scipio CJ against Gilgamesh Nebu, a commanding victory. I appreciated that Hellgate in our testing here just had all these archer pairs and he kept running them out, which was pretty cool to test against. Up next, we've got Guan. Okay. This is a Scipio and Esong. I thought, let's just try it against Scipio and Herald. And Scipio Esong did well. It won the fight but lost the trade. And this was, I mean, obviously about as close as you can get to a nearly tied matchup here. 1,277 units remaining in the fight. I just wanted to do this to prove a point, which is that Scipio is extremely strong and Esong is extremely versatile. Put them together and, like, obviously that was a recipe for some success there, which we saw. Not that I think that's a meta pair. Just like, I just think that the fact that it works is pretty cool. This is a Scipio Alex versus a Guan Alex. This is a much closer one than the previous report I showed. About a 1,000 sev differential here. In the next report, this is maybe the moneymaker. This is probably going to be the thumbnail of the video. The Scipio with Sun Tzu against Guan and Alex. And the Scipio Sun Tzu won. Now look, you saw a bunch of Scipio and Alexander the Great reports where I actually performed worse than when I had Sun Tzu as the secondary. So there's definitely randomness involved here, and I'm not going to delude myself into thinking that there isn't. So this happened to win. In this particular instance, the Sun Tzu secondary loses a bunch of other fights, which I'll show you. So I wouldn't take this as Sun Tzu is God tier. I would take this as a starting point. If you were using a Sun Tzu, it would be fine. Okay? Next report is Scipio and Sun Tzu. I mentioned some of the testing is a little scuffed. You know, a few people walk through the AoE here, but I would kind of have expected Gilgamesh and Ramses to do some serious work against infantry, and in this instance, they really do. Negative trade for me by about 10,000. In the next report, I also lose this one, Scipio and Sun Tzu. Keep in mind, Scipio is not a dueling march. It does AoE damage and AoE shielding. This is all about group fights, and this is just individual testing to just get a sense of how the commander performs. But we lost this one by about 9,000 against the Nevsky Minamoto. Strong, really strong combo. I've said before, like, it's a lot of just dastardly single target damage. It's oppressive amounts of single target damage. Here is a Scipio CJ against Artemisia Amonatori. This report went in my favor pretty significantly. It was about less than 10,000 of a victory, but still a victory nonetheless here. And I do think that Scipio and CJ are a great pair together. I just think if you want slightly more total mitigation, and this is like really a micro optimization, you kind of split them up based off of the way that their skill damage reductions work. But look at this. Scipio CJ versus Guan Leo. Now, this Guan Leo, I think, is 5511. And you may be wondering, how is a 5511 Leo these days? And I think it still is a better secondary to Guan Yu than Alexander the Great, assuming you don't have lots of expertise legendaries to go and work with. But I will point out that given the presence of Scipio and how strong he is, and given how really narrow Leonidas is, he's only good with Guan, in my opinion. That's the only place I'm going to use him. I think that he's a relatively strong investment at 5511, but low versatility. So once you stop, using Leo with Guan, you're going to stop using him entirely, in my opinion. That's the downside there of investing in Leo. Scipio and CJ versus Gilga Nebu. I win this one by a really commanding amount. 17,000 for me, 31,000 for them. And Gilga Nebu is a great pair, by the way. That's a great open field pair. Let's go to the next one here. Scipio and CJ versus Nevsky and Minamoto. I win this one which is a little surprising because the single target damage on Nevsky Minamoto is insane. That actually is a march that is sort of designed for team fights because of the way that, surrounding works with Alexander Nevsky. But I would say that between these two, probably the Alex Nevsky here and Minamoto is more single target damage focused. So I still think this is a pretty good win here for the Scipio and CJ combo. In this next report, a win against Nebu and Ramses, also a good pairing for the open field here. 21,700 to 28,900. And continuing on, Scipio CJ against Ramses and Cyrus. Now, I would flip their order here. Cyrus primary, Ramses secondary. I don't think that would meaningfully change the outcome, however. 21,000 to 27,700. The fact that we have a lot of AoE utility infantry commanders beating single target damage specialists, I think, is pretty telling here for the strength of Scipio. This next report is a Guan Scipio versus Pakal and Harold. The Pakal and Harold are expertised, and it is a pretty strong victory. I wouldn't say maybe necessarily commanding, but 22,000 to 30,000. I guess the only reason that it is kind of actually a commanding victory is to look a little more closely. You can see this is 230,000 troops. So I'm VIP 16, not even, I'm actually VIP 15. And he's at VIP 17. He's got 5% all damage. So I think that Pakal and Harold are just, you can't beat them as a cheeseburger march. They're disgusting. If you don't know what cheeseburgering is, I'll have a card up in the top. But the takeaway here is that I don't think this is a great open field march generally. I just think it's really good as a cheeseburger march if they're going to surround it. If we keep going here. Here is a report with Guan Scipio. So now we're in the Scipio secondary reports, okay? Guan Scipio is a pair that obviously I think is really hyped. This wins against the Scipio Alex combo, which doesn't surprise me. I think it should. Report is a little bit scuffed with people walking through AoE damage, but that just means I would have done better slightly because my damage was reduced by 15% per target. Looking to the next report here, this is interesting. So this is XY versus Minamoto. Is the XY maxed? It is. So XY Minamoto also has a disgusting amount of damage that it puts out, but still a win for the infantry. You would expect infantry to win against cavalry, but 20,400 to 26,300. And up next, this is a Saladin Mehmed. Now, the Saladin is not expertised. The Mehmed is not expertised either. And also, he is VIP 17. So he's got 5% all damage and extra troop capacity. And I'm still winning. But they aren't expertise commanders. So I don't know how much we take away from this. Let's look at the next one here. Guan CJ versus Guan Leo. So here I get wrecked. I got really wrecked. Now, this is a Guan CJ, no Scipio. I wanted to baseline. I wanted a comparison point. I ran all these tests. You're about to see them against these Guan Leos. And I wanted to see, hey, let's run another popular Guan combo in the mix. And I lose by a lot. I lose by 13,000 sevs. Keep this in mind when I show you some of these other Guan reports here. Here's a Guan Scipio against a Harold Scipio. Now, Harold Scipio is a pretty cool idea. And if we look here, they are double expertised. We've got 21,000 sevs for me and about 25,000 sevs for him. So this is I'd call it a pretty close fight, and randomness could change who is the victor in this instance. Here is a Alex Scipio combo against a Guan Leo. Remember I said I wanted to benchmark how good the Guan CJ was doing against a Guan Leo? It could just be I got really unlucky with the silence timing. Okay, it's hard to say without running multiple tests, but here is 25,000 to 33,700, majorly in favor of the Alex and Scipio combo. To the next report, this is 30,800 to 28,900. This is another Guan Leo test, and I'm using Trajan, folks. Trajan Scipio, which was winning a shocking amount of duels. And I think that is because Trajan is a commander that scales over time. In other words, as the fight progresses, he is going to get more and more defense, which is going to be oppressive. So against a combo that is maybe lower DPS, which is the Guan Leo, I think it does better. It would probably do worse against high damage cavalry like XY Nevsky, because I don't think that Trajan would have as much time to scale. And this is not even mixed troops. Not even mixed troops in here, man. That's all infantry. Mixed troops, I think, would just do better in a lot of ways. That would activate an all damage taken boost from Trajan. Anyways, next fight here, Alex and Scipio against Neb and Isong. Obviously, Neb Isong, extremely popular AoE March, but look, Alexander the Great and Scipio, I mean, that's kind of an AoE, oriented March as well. The debuff from Alexander the Great is an AoE debuff. The shielding requires you to have a nearby ally. And we're looking at 21,400 to about 28,000 in favor of the Alex and Scipio. It's like I said, the shielding might not always line up perfectly and might not stack, but it's still a really good combo, okay? Here is another Alex and Scipio against the Guan Leo, about 24,000 to 28.5. I'm obviously rounding a little bit here, but this is a solid outcome for the Alex and Scipio. It is still a good combo. Up next is Guan and Scipio paired against Guan and Leo. And this was 25,200 to 28,900. Guan and Scipio, if you're making one March, that's really where it's at, man. Here's another one. Guan Scipio against Guan Leo, 29,000 to 26,000. I actually lose the trade, but win the fight. And that is all of the reports we have. So all in all, I think that Scipio is looking like a very, very strong commander. And I think for open field right now, he is almost certainly the single best commander to go in expertise. Not by a little, but by a lot. Is he so overpowered that he's going to beat everything he sees? No. When we did a poll on the stream, people felt like his power level was about what they were expecting, which is strong, but on the same tier as Nevsky. Now, there is obviously more testing that I want to go and do. I want to do more testing against XY Nevsky as a combo and run all the same sorts of combos that we ran out in the field against some of those. But in this particular kingdom, we're still just getting our first Nevsky wheel in the Season of Conquest. So it's going to take a minute before everybody has both Nevsky and Scipio and all these other things maxed and XY. We got a lot of commanders we're working on here, just getting into Season of Conquest. But if you have enjoyed this video and you want to see when these commanders are in use, then you should subscribe to the channel. You'll get to see Alex and CJ together. You'll see Guan and Scipio, because in just a couple weeks, we'll be entering KVK and doing battling for Pass 4 opening in Heroic Anthem KVK. So subscribe so you don't miss it. And if you want to see a much more detailed video breaking down Scipio and talents, as well as my initial predictions for really great pairings, I'm going to have a card up in the top for my full Scipio guide, which will give you everything you need to know. And until next time, you have fun smashing the kingdom.